Hey, what's up? It's John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another Power Hour live stream, a 1 hour show about web dev and pretty much everything else, or nothing else. As always, I'm joined by one and only Mr. Paul Bratlovsky, the developer advocate for the greatest headless
Greatest.
CMS ever,
Best.
Strapi, and the mastermind behind the greatest ever YouTube channel, Coding After 30. Again, Post channel is Coding After 30. And last but not least, as always, we are sponsored by the only JavaScript framework that actually gets the job done. And of course, it's no other than our beloved jQuery.
I know. In
As always, feel
2023
free
still
to,
relevant.
as always, feel free to drop questions and opinions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability or not. So,
By
yeah.
the way, this is the best, very best web dev power hour podcast slash show that you will ever watch. And we don't just say it just to say it, but it's the facts. It's the facts.
Yes, this is the only show that you'll need that will get you through your web journey.
So Alex is like, rip jQuery. No, jQuery is still relevant. What do you mean you don't use it, Alex? What are you talking about? jQuery is the greatest framework, JavaScript framework ever created. Oh,
jQuery is the only framework you should know.
listen,
Rest of them is just flack.
yeah,
They don't do anything.
my
jQuery.
refrigerator is programmed in jQuery. Come on.
Yeah. Speaking, by the way, there's a few things that I want to right away discuss before we have any questions. As a sign of what happened last week, we just had to cancel. We're just like
Yeah, I
last
wasn't feeling
minute,
good. Yeah.
whatever. It's yeah, sometimes it happens like this. We're basically planning them, but if something happens, we're not really forcing them. It's kind of like a I don't I don't want it to be, this to become like a not a like basically like not something that, we need to for sure do it. If we have time, we do it, and if not, then if something else happens, then something else happens. No biggie. We'll do our best
Yeah,
and
no,
everything.
definitely. And I wasn't feeling good last week, so yeah, but it happens, But we're here today.
Yeah. How was your birthday?
It was good. It was great. I turned 43. I know a lot of people like keep giving me like crap on my channel now. They're like, coding after 30. You should rename it to like coding grandpa, or at least coding after 40. And so I'm like, no, I feel like I'm a 30-year-old. And so but the birthday was great. And also last week I also had opportunity to see my family, which was kind of awesome. And my, doing good. I can't complain. Eat a lot of cake.
It's a lot of what kind of cake?
It was
That's
terrible. It
that's
was like
the
it wasn't even good. Like like when you
Oh,
eat
that's the
dessert.
worst one. That's
Yeah,
the worst one when you know that yeah, but it's not good, but you're still eating it.
yeah,
Yeah,
you just
that's
eat
the
it for
worst
the
one.
sake of diabetes. You like
Yep,
I
yep,
need
yep,
like more
yeah,
cake.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah,
The oldest daughter has the egg allergy, so once in a while we need to get like a snack. Like basically, we cannot get anything with eggs. So of course, a lot of times we're testing something, like we're getting something new or whatever. But quite often it's like it's something not even that tasty, but since it's there, I feel bad for throwing it out. So I'm like, whatever. But yeah,
yeah,
that,
yeah. Um, so yeah,
uh,
I was kind of curious in the chat. What's everybody's favorite framework for front end that they've been using? Because
yes. On that note, finally, after listening to Paul years after years after years about how great Remix is, this week I finished re-recording Mern, so I switched that course to all the latest libraries, React Query, latest React Router, Vite, Mongoose 7, whatever, rest of the stuff. And I also added few extra features to the
oh,
application.
nice.
I was I started messing with Remix, and yes, Paul is correct. I absolutely love it, especially yeah, I mean, I technically nothing against Next.js, but it's so much simpler. so much, way less things you need to learn. It's pretty straightforward. You get your loaders, you get your actions, and you're pretty much good to go. And then as far as setting up the file structure, you just need to follow some guidelines how you set up the files. And what's also really, really awesome is that they have that outlet component, which effectively you can just keep setting up those nested layouts. So you start with one, that's going to be your parent, and then all the way up to whatever, how many levels deep. And it's extremely straightforward, especially if you spent a little bit of time on getting to know the latest React router version. I mean, it's pretty much one-to-one. The difference is, of course, that some of the things are happening here on the server. So I'm super, super like excited. I
Yeah.
just have, I'm sorry. I just have one question. How do you handle what's your approach to handling auth in Next? Sorry, Remix.
I know, like everybody keeps saying next, and we're like Remix. So the way you do it, there's a couple different ways, but you basically create a form that's going to call its own endpoint, and you could have the logic in that endpoint for handling auth. And so in an application that I built a while ago, I basically created a endpoint that runs on the server that would do all its auth through the greatest CMS ever, Strapi. But you could do any logic you want. But I would recommend for people who want to kind of see how to create auth from scratch with Remix is to check out the course that Kenzie Dots did, or the one that is on their website, the Joke app. It does have auth that you will implement yourself from scratch. And so that's like a good place to start to kind of see how they do it.
After my as far as my when I was just researching a little bit, I haven't set up the auth yet. And like quite often, the library, I believe it was Remix Auth or something like that, was coming up. So I was just wondering whether you have used that one.
I haven't used it. What I would recommend, because I use Strapi as a backend for everything, just because it just allows me to build things way faster and try ideas faster, because I never have to worry about creating a complete backend from scratch. And so I try to rely on things that exist. So I haven't had a chance to try Remix Auth. What I would recommend for new people trying it out, go through the basic tutorials they have on their website and try to implement auth from scratch, just because it'll be like a great learning experience to kind of see how you handle auth and how you store like the username like on the database, and how you make the tokens and stuff like that. So as a learning experience, I think it'll be great. But after that, it's fine, what works for you. And for me and my last project, I used Strapi with and made it where you get authorized through GitHub. So you don't even give your email. You just click a button. It takes you to GitHub. You authorize through GitHub, and you'll be able to log in. And then as you log in with GitHub, that will create a user in my Strapi backend. But funny thing about Remix, by the way, because at my company, I had to build a project using Next 13, and Next 13 seems like they're taking a lot of features that Remix had and implementing them. And so, when you were still taking your time jumping on this Remix bandwagon, I was like, let me make a little Next.js tutorial so I could like share with Coding Addict community. And now to hear you say like how you also love Remix, I'm like, oh my gosh, I converted him. I'm happy. But I'm like, but why did I work on this Next.js thing? But what I'm going to say, though, the coolest thing I like about Next.js, the two things that I don't like, it's so new that every week something changes. So you can't really make like a good course about it, to John's point that he made last stream. But the thing that I do like server-side React components, and getting data is a lot more straightforward because you don't need to use like use effect or use state and stuff like that. But from my personal preference, I still like Remix more because it's way more straightforward. It's much more simpler. And there's an idea, it's called progressive enhancement. And so the way Remix works, you could literally turn off all your JavaScript and your app will still work. Where something like Next or some other frameworks, that's just not the case. I'm not saying you should, but it means you're not relying just on all the JavaScript to do a lot of the stuff. It literally just focuses on the web basics, which I think is pretty awesome.
We're gonna jump into to the questions in a second. I just want to quickly mention something about this topic that I've been thinking this week when I started working on a remix. Kind of one of the cool things when something new like this pops up is the fact that if you are kind of one of the, I wouldn't say the first one, but like let's say one of the first ones which who starts implementing it, you get bunch of like nice opportunities, right? So I'm saying you still need to be good at like what you do and everything, but you like when something is starting off in a community, it's if you're like implementing it at the very kind of beginning, you just can get a bunch of cool options. Like for example, when I was starting out, actually Gatsby just came out, and I was able to record a course on that and just kind of learn that, and everything kind of took off starting from that point. Or to the example of Paul, where he went to the Remix meetup, and then he was able even to perform like give a speech in a conference and everything. It's one of those things where you need from I always preach that yes, you should kind of, at least I always wait on the sidelines and everything, but if there's something really cool, it's definitely worth investing your time. Especially as I'm looking at Remix, I definitely see that people who are creating it, they have so much experience on dealing with just in general creating stuff for the community, right? So the people behind React Router and everything, and Kenzie Dodds, and so I definitely think that this is one of those things where Remix is here to stay, and this is why. Again, for the simplicity sake, for starters, I definitely would go with that one and everything. So, but of course, I'm not like dissing here on Next or anything like that. Everyone is going to say, well, every job application right now is saying Next. Maybe that's the case right now, but I have a strong feeling that Remix is going to make a pretty big
Yeah.
kind of jump in that front.
And the argument I would say when someone says Next or someone says Remix, they're both use React. So if you know React, like switching, between the two, it's not that difficult. It's very slight changes, and you just use their docs. Both have really good docs. I like Remix a little bit better. Just that's something that I really enjoy working. I feel like I'm more productive. But if you know React, you could switch frameworks like easily based on the requirements. So I always use Remix, but at my job, I was asked to create something with Next.js, and making that transition wasn't that difficult. The one thing that I was going to say to your point, John, saying like when something new comes up and you jump on and you start learning it, what's awesome, you become the expert in that new thing. And like we use like Remix as an example, and I'll use the Next.js 13 as an example because it has so many features that a lot of the old Next.js folks don't like. And to me, I'm like, no, this is great. And nobody wants to learn the new features because they're like, oh, this sucks. It's like whatever. But I just learn all the new stuff. And so when I talk to people in the community, they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could do that. So I'm not saying that everybody go learn Next.js. Go learn Remix. Remix is awesome, combined with Strapi. But what I'm saying is the beauty of development to me is that if you are not afraid to constantly learn something new, you always have the opportunity to stay relevant in your field. It's only when you stop learning. And to me, it's like that's such an awesome feeling, is because you're always going to be job ready if you continue to stay relevant with technology. It's not like some people will complain, well, I don't want to spend my whole life learning things. Then I would say that coding is maybe not the best profession for you. But if you don't mind learning new things and this growth mindset, the power of becoming a developer, even in 2023 with all the AI hype, is the fact that you can learn the technologies that are up to date that companies use, and you'll be just as an expert in them as somebody else who's learning them, because they're just brand new. Like things change all the time. And so I'm really excited about that because I feel like I'll always be relevant.
Yeah, it comes down to like you definitely need to have your fundamentals in place. So it's always JavaScript, always React, and everything else. Yeah, you should start with that. But like once you get to the point, I definitely want to encourage you to look for those opportunities because that's something new. Because it will like at the end of the day, it's going to be great benefit.
Hold
Okay.
on, before you get too far, I love this comment. Rick Fink says, "I've never seen John's face. You are a legend." Look, that's like,
You
you know what? I'm waiting for the day where, you know how people have Chuck Norris jokes, they're gonna have John jokes.
oh, they already
Oh
do. Do you
no,
want me
we got to make a API. All it is like like tall tales.
do you
You
want me
know,
to read something that I get quite often? And of course, no, I got it over here. Just listen to this one. Are you ready?
yeah.
Okay. So basically, I got got this message, and this is very typical as far as the comments that I get or tweets or whatever. Hey John, I used to watch your voice over videos, and I always thought you're a very old guy until I saw you on YouTube channel named Coding After 30. Thanks, Paul. Um, thanks to all your tutorials, they helped me land my dream job. Whatever. What I'm saying is that yes, this is.
Although, you know what, I'm gonna take the credit 1000% to bringing you out in terms of showing your face. And I was so honored that we did the few videos on my channel that you agreed to, which I don't know why, because like it's like, who's Paul? Who the hell is coding after 30? It's like, why would you agree to it? But anyway, I'm glad that it happened. And it literally, people like, oh my God, that's what he looks like. That's to me, it's like so funny. But the other side of that argument, I now get comments like this: "Hey, tell John he's super awesome. I really love his courses." And I'm like, I'm also awesome. Come on. Come
Well,
on.
yeah,
What are you
that comes
doing? I'm
with
just kidding.
territory,
I'm
but
kidding. But it's awesome. It's
no,
good.
no, no. But yeah, for sure. If it wouldn't be for Paul's invite, I was always avoiding the camera to begin with. So, um, even though they keep saying that your face is supposed to appear, but I'm like, well, not really.
Yeah, not really. I agree with that.
I
You
just
know,
don't like. I understand maybe there's if you have some kind of intro video, but I just don't see the point of like, okay, you have that little circle all the way on the right hand side, but it's like, okay, do you like? Is there any difference? Besides, I have like all kinds of blankets here on the back to mask
the
the
yeah.
sound and everything. So, yeah. Anyway, do you want to do that? What's the rapid fire or whatever? And
Yeah, there's one
then
quick question. Yeah, and then we could do rapid fire. Someone asked, I think it's Habibo. Habibo said, should we become full stack nowadays? I still didn't master front end yet, and I'm working on my portfolio. The one thing I would say, and this is something that Alex said, that he doesn't feel like there's any junior full stack roles. And from my experience working, I don't think full stack is a junior level position because there's a lot that you need to learn. And so the way I broke into industry, and this is what I still recommend for people to do, is do it through front end, get hired, and then start transitioning to full stack. Even though I'm on my transition into full stack, I still consider myself only a front end developer. And I feel like that's the best way in my mind to go about it.
yeah, no, I'll repeat the same point. We have been saying this for already quite a few times that essentially the whether you like it or not, the entry role is is the front end one. And yes, there's a bunch of people who apply for the same position. If you want to take a different route, there is an option where you can try to go for back end role only. But again, it comes with its own kind of challenges because, like Paul, like already mentioned before, as far as backend, you're way more relying on the more computer sciencey stuff. It's not just setting up the routes and adding few controllers. That's not just a backend. You're dealing with way different issues. And also, like as far as in our community, Alex would be the best one to ask because but even though he still kind of applied as far as I understand there as a front end, and then he kind of went into the back end role. And yeah, maybe there are some other people in community who I have heard of that have done that, but it's very like few, not that many. It's
Yeah.
mostly through front end.
And just speaking from experience, when I started learning to code, I tried to learn everything. And Delightus made a good point here. He said, get good at front end first. You don't want to be jack of all trades and master of none. And that's exactly what happened the first few years of learning development for me, is that I was trying to learn everything and I literally couldn't keep track of everything. And so I was kind of going in circle and not making any progress. It's only when I made a commitment, my friend just told me, learn JavaScript, learn React, and get a front end role. And that's kind of what I ended up doing. And that's what helped me to finally get the job. I think the field is so vast that there's too much to learn. It's so overwhelming. So you need to kind of put these blinders on the sides, pick one thing, and just keep doing that one thing until you get a job. But what happens, because people have these unrealistic expectations of how long it takes to find a job, there's many variables. They feel like, oh, maybe because I don't have a job yet, I need to learn this thing over here and this thing over there. And no, just stick to like your route. And I can't not recommend front end development path. It is the quickest, it is the fastest, and keep doing it until you get good enough to get hired. So one little story about me: when I got my first real job at 39, I'm 43 now, just to put things in perspective for those of you who are wondering. And when I was getting my first job, like I kept going to interviews when I was like 38, 37. I was like, why am I not getting jobs? And I was like, maybe I need to go to boot camp. Maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to do that. And I realized the reason I wasn't getting jobs is because I wasn't good enough for the front end roles that I was applying. And I realized that I just need to get better at front end to a point where when I go to an interview, they take me seriously. And I feel like if I kept being like, oh, I need to learn full stack, I need to learn this, I need to learn this language, I would have been pulling myself apart into many directions. Never gotten to a point where I would be good enough to pass an interview.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I definitely suggest at least trying to learn a little bit of Node and setting up the server, because it's going to tremendously help you to understand how the requests are taking place. Because one thing to understand in pretty much modern development, you'll be making requests. You'll be making not just get requests, but post and everything. So most of the stuff is going to be in a server, and you'll be communicating with the server in some shape or form. Again, it depends on setup company and etc. But in general, once you understand like the other side of that request, that has been like awesome experience and everything. But again, as far as front end entry role, the full stack is not going to be that easy to get into.
I'm gonna do a hot take here. Just because you know Node.js doesn't make you a full stack developer. So I am familiar with Node. I took John's course on Node. I'm able to build a basic API. There's a lot other stuff around that you need to know. You need to be very comfortable with a bunch of different databases like PostgreSQL, SQL type of database. You need to know Mongo. You need to understand how to troubleshoot databases, how to make queries databases. You need to understand deployment infrastructure. There's just so much stuff that goes on. So when John says Node, like what I know what a lot of people might think is like, oh, just because I learned Node, I qualify as a full stack developer. That's not true. Like the way I look at Node, it's like that edge of front-end development, which allows you to create API points that you could consume in your application. But it doesn't mean that you all of a sudden a full stack developer. So for me, I'm familiar with Node. I could create basic APIs. I understand like controllers, middlewares, services that you create, like the general idea, but I still consider myself a front-end developer. So when, to John's point, it's like, yes, you should be able to, like, if I would recommend for someone to learn Node, it's to learn Node so you could understand what APIs are and how to consume them. That'll be like my perspective. But still stay focused on this idea of like, I'm a front-end developer, and get your job that way.
Or alternatively, you can start using Strapi, which right away spit out all the CRUD requests the moment you create the instance, and then you can do it.
Yeah, 100%. So like, I'm really lazy. Super lazy. I hate like doing work, and people always like say like, you're a Strapi shill. I'm not a Strapi shill. Is that maybe I am now, but I've been always using Strapi. And the reason why I use Strapi is because it's something that allowed me as a front-end developer build full stack applications very easily. With Strapi, it's a headless CMS. You could get started out of the box literally in 2 minutes, and you'll have a working API without any additional work on your end. And what's awesome about Strapi, and this is kind of how I got into more backend development, because Strapi is open source. You have access to the code. It's highly customizable. You could literally start creating custom routes, middleware, controllers, and services in a very similar fashion as you would if you were building your own API, let's say with Express or Node.js. And to me, I found it like as a beginner, it's very easy to get started to where you could have a full stack application with authentication, role-based access control. And as you grow on your journey, becoming a better development, you're able to piece by piece transition to that full stack by starting to customize your Strapi instance with additional features to a point where you're like, oh, I feel comfortable understanding how like a backend functions. What is a controller? What is it, need to do? Why would I call a service from a controller instead of putting all my code into the controller, right? Because I want to be able to maybe reuse services and other different controllers. How do routes work? How do policies work in routes? And this is stuff that I was able to learn through Strapi. So then when I do work with Node or Express or KOA, another backend framework, all those concepts are familiar. And for me, like, if I didn't know those things, Strapi still allowed me to create cool full stack applications with authentication. And by the way, if someone could guess, how did I get introduced to Strapi? I would love to hear it. I know how I got introduced to Strapi. Somebody was using it in their course.
I think
I think it was. I think it was definitely like I saw it in one of your courses, and I was like, "What is this Strapi thing?" And then it got me exploring, and then I saw a bunch of other ones, and then I just never looked back. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, that is funny. That actually Strapi was my first kind of try at the full stack, and I did try it in Svelte at that time, but that course is no longer available since Svelte made a bunch of updates and everything. So yeah, I kind of took it off. So it was getting old, and I'm not sure whether I'll have time to do anything about it since I want to work on that small little remix course. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about right now. Yeah, you want to do those?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's look at all the questions.
This one is perfect for you. Is Strapi built on Node?
So yes, there's a Node framework called KOA, and that's what we use heavily in Strapi. So KOA is built by the same folks that made Express. It's just a more leaner version. And the reason why I love KOA best, Express, you write a lot of promises, and so you have a lot of nested then statements. But with KOA, everything is async await. So I feel like your code ends up being much cleaner. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. But again, if you know Node.js, you'll be able to easily jump into using Strapi and create custom stuff, or continue to learn Express or KOA.
This is a good one. What was your experience like learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript for the first time? Things you would change if you could go back.
For me, it was. Go ahead, John.
No. It's fine. It's fine.
I was just gonna, because it just came quickly to me. One thing that the hardest thing for me, like none of it made sense, and I felt like I was stupid. That was the hardest part, and the thing that I realized, and I realized it through my friends telling me, hey, you just need to continue to focus and break things down into simple building blocks and keep working. But I didn't know what it meant. And what I realized, I took John's HTML and CSS course. The thing that helped me to better understand is all the practice that you do. And then I realized it's not the fact that I took a tutorial, was the fact that John's tutorial has a lot of practice, and that's what will make you understand HTML and CSS, or just coding in general, is literally doing the same thing until you understand it before you move on. So the rule, if I were to give people advice, if you're going through the course, don't just watch the course and follow what the instructor's doing. Follow the course. Let's say you complete the first section, close the course, and see if you could, from memory, build a few practice projects or examples, little tiny ones, based on what you learn. And that repetition, that practice, it's what's going to get you better. So I'll give you an example. Both John and I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, greatest sport ever made. Like, you could learn an armbar, but you're not going to be good at it until you've done it like hundreds of times, many, many hours. And that's just like the unfortunate, like, kind of thing that a lot of people forget about learning. It is the repetition that engraves it and makes you confident in it. And just like in jiu-jitsu, I have to do like 1,000 arm bars. In JavaScript, I should probably use, let's say the for loop a lot of times, to a point where I know what it is. I know how it works. And even if you forget like how to exactly the syntax of it, you can always look it up, but at least you know what it is, you know how to use it. So that'll be like kind of like my tip for that.
Yeah, for me, like, I guess I need to break it up in two parts. I mean, this question I could probably answer till the end of the stream, but just to go quickly, things I would do differently, just like Paul said, I would focus even more on just the small projects. I wouldn't. One of the things I'm noticing in general, when people are starting out, they right away want to build next Facebook and whatever, and the more you progress, you understand how actually difficult it is, because how many engineers are working on that project. So you understand that it's not just one person sitting down and just code it out in like 2 hours or something like that. So focus on some small things, really small things, and you'll see that it initially might seem like totally useless, but then once you start combining those small things, you'll see that it's actually way easier for you eventually to build those big projects. And that repetition comes from literally doing that thing over and over and over and over again. And that's one of those things where people are like, well, I already know that. Yeah, you might know that, but you'll need to apply. If you're building a bunch of small things, you'll need to apply the same thing in maybe different variations, or you'll just have to kind of reuse it multiple times, and then you'll definitely know it. Because it's one thing just go through and know it, and then there's another one when you need to start implementing, because there's always something that happens, right? This doesn't work, or maybe there was something else. So I would definitely do that. And as far as like my experience, I think I was, first of all, I didn't see how both of them go together, because I remember kind of looking at, okay, so you have HTML and CSS. And again, when I was like studying, I didn't build anything small. I was just kind of going through tutorials and that's it. And I was just like, okay, well, whatever it is. And I believe actually my big kind of breakthrough as far as just understanding in my head was actually starting a bootstrap. And then with the bootstrap, I was able to kind of copy the site that was there. And I was like, okay, so this how everything works. And then the more I worked with bootstrap, the more I understood actually CSS, because you start going, because you need to modify something and you start going under the hood, like what is actually this class doing? And that's when I kind of went to understanding more CSS. And as far as JavaScript, I just didn't see the connections, because you have a bunch of console logs. This is what you do initially with JavaScript. You're like, hey, this is an object and this is a property and this is what you do. But then you don't see this connection, because there's HTML and CSS. But then as far as JavaScript, first of all, it takes I wouldn't say long, but quite a bit of time until you get to DOM. So only when you get to the DOM, then you are like, okay, this is how I select elements. This is how I can change stuff. And again, I would kind of always try to build something small and try to connect them. And when we're talking about big projects, I honestly would leave them last, once you have learned React, for example, because you'll see that it's much easier to build big projects with a framework. With all due respect to all the vanilla JS supporters and everything, there's a reason why there is a framework. It actually makes things easy. And I would even argue that if you have a really big project in mind, then wait till you have a remix or whatever next, which even makes it things simpler. and you'll see how easy it is to set up the pages, authentication, and everything else. So what I'm saying is just keep building those small things along the way, and you'll get there faster. Well, this is a vision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's totally like what John said. And I think the biggest thing that a lot of people get really caught up at, they get caught up at how fast will it take me to get a job, and you just worry on that, not realizing like this stuff is not easy. This stuff is hard. I know there's a lot of YouTube channels that tell you, look, oh, in 30 days I got this, I made $1 bajillion, or in 3 months, like, after my course you're going to do this. It takes a lot of work. So I'll tell you a story. So I owe a lot to John's courses of getting hired, and he probably is tired of hearing that. But when I started learning to code, I started my YouTube channel just to kind of see and keep history of like, what is my progress? Could I actually get a job? But what's interesting, I met a bunch of people through my YouTube channel, and I met this girl named Katya. She lives in Germany. She started being part of my community, and she started going through John's courses. And then she did the work. She just understood it's going to take time. I need to build good projects for portfolios. She created a portfolio project. She created a website, put her portfolios in there, and then she started like going through the process. And then eventually, she had like 1,000 no's, and then she eventually got hired. And now she's been in the industry ever since. And I think she's already been working there at least 3 years now, because I think she got her job before I started working on Strapi. And the reason why I tell the story is because she just did the work to get to where she needed to go. I have other lot of members in my community which continue making excuses why they can't get hired without applying themselves to do work because it's hard. And so there's two camps: people that gonna just continue no matter what to improve their knowledge, to continue to learn, continue to suffer because it is hard, and continue applying, continue failing, and then eventually get hired. And then there's people that are like, oh, this is too hard. I thought this was going to be easier. And then they quit too early. And I'm not saying this to make fun of people, but I just want to set realistic expectations, is that you need to expect that you will be putting effort into it. And there was a point, there's another comment. Krishna says, I have recently joined a job while working for building applications. I'm unable to code without help. Yes, because it is hard. And what I want to say to his or her point is that that's exactly how your first job is going to be as a developer. When I spent years learning to code, and I thought like I'm finally making progress. When I got my first job, I felt like I didn't know anything. And in the next 6 months, I probably learned more on my first job than I did in previous 3 years of learning to code on my own. And that's just how it works. It's hard. It takes time. You need to put in the time. You need to put in the work. And that's how you're going to get there.
For sure. Sorry, my mouse disappeared. Can I get it back? Okay, what else we've got? I think also Alex was chiming in here on the questions here.
Yeah, Alex has really good opinions. I'm just going to quickly, because Alex mentioned it. He's like, nobody uses KOA except Strapi. And I think Strapi is alive. But one thing I would say, though, I'm so surprised because after using KOA, I don't see myself going back to Express. And I know it's like a personal like preference, but it just does certain things so much nicer. It's funny, though. But yeah, it's true. Alex.
We also had one that was a little bit before. There was something about YouTube playlists. I agree. Transition to backend should feel natural once you outgrow your role as front-end dev. Otherwise, it becomes too much to handle, especially a junior role. Yep, that's a good point. I'm learning React and I'm having difficulty finding any suitable projects to implement what I have learned. Any project idea or any other suggestion? I'm sorry for laughing, like not really laughing, but just smiling about this question. And the reason for that is because we have discussed this quite extensively in here. Again, I disagree with this idea that your project needs to be original. what the most important thing is that you can build that project on your own, and they will see that right away once they start asking the questions.
Yeah.
It's not about like e-commerce store is an e-commerce store. A blog is a blog. The idea that just out of the blue you'll come up with some like super unique project and whatever. I just don't believe that. I really don't. I'll always go back to the example where on Paul's channel, and I believe he was also in this chat as well. I forgot his name. Remember the project that the guy
To the,
did?
yeah, he built a bug tracker, and
Yeah, he built like nothing like original. It's a bug tracker, but the idea that he was able to implement all those features by himself, and you can clearly see that he was doing the code and everything. That's about it. There's
yeah,
no like you can Google quickly what are going to be the top projects and whatever. Yeah, and it's definitely going to be e-commerce because that's where you'll get hired. There's definitely going to be probably most likely some kind of blog. There's going to be, again, you're looking for some kind of CRUD functionality. That's what you'll build. But of course, like as you start working the project, you'll start adding more features, and that's where that real learning starts. It's not just I think that people just spend kind of too much time on coming up with something original instead of just building it themselves.
yeah.
Ultimately.
And the bug track idea came from this channel called Code Foundry. They're really big on this like idea of build an application that has full CRUD and authentication. And I think if you could do something like that, your project will stand out. Yeah, I see Matt Thomas asking a question. He's like, one question, John, what do you think using Next.js on backend instead of Express or Node.js? Should I still use Node? And same thing could be said about Remix, because Next.js and Remix are both full stack applications, which allow you to do everything in one code base. I have
Actually,
opinions on this, of course, but I'd like to see what
that would be
yours.
interesting because I think in this time our opinions might actually differ. To tell you honestly, as I'm looking at those full stack apps, I'm not super sold on that. I'm not, because I feel like, for example, just again, this is gonna say like I'm gonna say one thing why I'm not super sold as far as validation on a server. I believe that I mean, of course you can set it up, but I feel like building a backend separately and then having that as a front end app just gives me a little bit more control as I'm setting up everything. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
We're in 1000% agreement.
I wasn't sure, but yeah, that's kind of one of those things where it's awesome that you can do a bunch of things, but again, for me, it doesn't come like I'm not like 100% sold on just everything is in that app, everything is in that full stack. Again, it gives you superpowers when it comes to front end, because for the most simplest example, you can set up the API key essentially in your backend code, which is right there, right? So you don't have to create a server separately just so you can hide the API key, or you don't even need to, technically set up the serverless function. Literally, the code is right there. Just add it, and you're good to go. But as far as doing everything, I don't know. I mean, again, it depends on the size of the application on
To
the full stack application.
to me, I'm like, so I worked at a job where we use C# and the whole ASP.NET, and their front end and back end was all combined together as a full stack application. Next.js, Remix, you can do similar things, everything in one app. The issue I have with that is that then you're confined to one application. And if you wanted to share the same features, let's say with something else, or maybe you wanted content to be on your website and your iPhone app, or power something else like IoT, like I feel like you tie yourself down. And so for me, I like this approach of having a separate backend that I could put whatever front end I want. I don't even need a front end. I could just make API calls like using Postman or whatever, Insomnia, to get the data. And to me, I love that flexibility. And I'll give you an example where I got stuck. So I created this chat application with Next.js, which uses OpenAI to create like little cyberpunk characters with whom you're able to have a conversation with. And I was so happy. I was like, hey, I created this. And then I'm like, but I want another application that has similar chat functionality. But what? Like now I have to recreate it from scratch again. Like I have to create a whole. So then I was like, what am I doing? So I create a separate Strapi instance, and the only job this Strapi, and it could be like an Express server or whatever backend framework you like. I just use Strapi for everything. And the only job of that Strapi instance is to handle all my AI functionality. So I have image completion, chat completion, whatever it is, and that's my API. You could kind of say microservice that I could call from anywhere. So, and then I could have another like Strapi instance that could be something else. And because they're separate and I feel like they're more modular, I could make a call to appropriate API to get the thing that I want. And this gives me flexibility to have these different services that I can use to accomplish my goals. And tying everything into one application, to me, doesn't make sense unless you're building like a blog or something simple, I guess. But for me, I feel having a separate backend is just a lot more modular and better, especially if you decide that you want to change your front end. So I'll give you another example. Because I'm lazy, I have one Strapi in, and because it's because it's on its own, that same Strapi instance powers my Next.js application, powers my Remix application, and I also have a Chrome extension that uses it. And to me, that flexibility is like amazing.
That's a super awesome point. We have two good questions. I mean, all of them are good, but these are super good. First one, any thoughts about GitHub Copilot? I love it.
Yep.
What about you?
Yeah, I love it.
It's awesome. I haven't tried the one where it. I think it's still in beta, where it actually can see your code base. So it's not just giving you suggestions; it still gives you suggestions, but I think it only sees. I mean, or no, I mean, it additionally
That's what
sees
they
your.
say. Microsoft.
Yeah, but no, it's super nice. It's actually, I can make an argument that it's in some cases more useful than ChatGPT. I kind of use them both at the same time, so I
Yeah.
cannot really pinpoint, but I found both of them super helpful because, yeah, for me the biggest one is that they give you the stuff to think about, right? If you like, it gives you a suggestion as far as GitHub Copilot, and then when it comes to ChatGPT, quite often I just go back and I say, look, can you can you give me any suggestions how to improve this code? And quite often it comes up with something at least. Now, is it always correct? No. Is it like
Yeah.
is it always the best solution? No, but at least it gives you, okay, so this is how we can approach those things. So yeah, I absolutely find both of them very useful.
One thing I would say about Copilot and ChatGPT is that don't just use it to get the answer, but use it to help you understand what you're doing and why the code works. So like if you have code and you can't explain what it does by yourself, then you don't know what it does. And so before, where you used to use Google to look things up, you could now have a conversation about your code with ChatGPT and to kind of figure out what it does line by line. So like I was actually working on a CLI command where I was going to implement OpenAI to basically automatically put comments on my code to explain what it does. And then also I wanted to have an ability where I could ask my code base questions about what I wrote. And they could tell me like, hey, this is how you did this. Here's some improvements you could do. And one thing that I want to stress is that don't think of ChatGPT knowledge base where it's going to tell you truth. It's a language model that predicts what the next thing should be, and sometimes that prediction is wrong, and that's what they call hallucination. And so wherever you're using, ChatGPT, at least I know like Copilot is pretty good. Make sure you always review what it tells you and know that you could kind of confirm that it works by implementing it or by using it, but don't just blindly copy and paste. But to me, I love it. It's like godsend. What I've been doing recently to kind of as my personal challenge, any application that I make for myself for fun somehow has to utilize artificial intelligence in it. So I'm working on one plugin that allows you to automatically create text embeddings, which basically allows you to give your ChatGPT model, like OpenAI, context, so it could use your knowledge base for your chatbot. So now when someone's in your chatbot, they could ask questions and it will find the information based on the documents that I entered into it, which I think will be kind of cool. I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff people could build.
Are you planning to record like some kind of videos on the channel?
Yeah, I'm gonna record some. What I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of like, so I wanted to record some stuff for my channel. I also wanted to like talk to you more, create some stuff for you, like, because I want to share like kind of like the stuff that I'm building on a broader way to kind of show that there's all these different ideas people could use for little projects. And the reason why I started to use AI as like a must for me is because I don't think the AI industry is going to go backwards. It's definitely going to go forwards. Am I ever going to be an AI researcher? No. But what I want to be able to do, I want to be familiar with all the tools that exist. So as a front-end developer, I know how to implement them to build slightly cooler applications. So yeah, that's kind of why I do it, and like why I plan to release more videos around that topic.
No, I definitely agree. Again, we're not going to go into the, unless there's question about it. We're not going to go into the whole discussion again about taking the jobs and everything. But in general, I think it is super like cool feature that you can definitely add to your apps. Two more things that I want to mention about the AI. First of all, I was kind of troubleshooting the bug. I was using Express Validator. There's custom function, and there's a gotcha that if the custom function is async, actually you're not returning true or false. You need to kind of throw the error in the function. And I was debugging it with ChatGPT for like 50 to 20 minutes, and it didn't provide me the answer. But with those conversations, eventually I'm like, look, is it because of it's async? That's why there's this whole mess. And eventually I got there. So my point is, it's not always solution for everything, but at least it can get you on a right track. That's number one. Number two, if you have worked with I also, not only I was testing Remix, I was testing OpenAI, the API. And what's really cool, you can actually change the temperature as you're getting the answers. Now, what that means is the zero means it's going to be pretty much, straightforward answer. So let's say if I'm asking you, like if I'm asking ChatGPT, what is JavaScript, it's going to give me the most kind of answer that makes the most sense. Let's put it the most simplest way. If you go temperature, I believe you can go all the way to 2. It's just going to give you, it's whatever, a dog that's running by the house or whatever on. And of course, if you change it, that ChatGPT right now is a comedian, it's going to give you a funny joke. My point is, again, like just like Paul said, don't take those answers for 100% true, because it can go off. In his mind, you have the answer that's supposed to be for sure, and then but it also has those bunch of other options, and it can go anywhere
wild.
It pleases. There's one about Firebase. Please say a few words about Firebase. I found it quite powerful, but unfortunately, I don't find a lot of tutorials or discussions about it on the social platforms. I think it's kind of underrated product. Or Paul has like,
I have like really good opinion for that. If you're looking to get a job, don't use Firebase. Use like Postgres, build projects with like front-end technologies that people use. So I've worked at 3 different companies. None of them use Firebase. We all use like PostgreSQL for our database. And Firebase is great. And there's actually a lot of tutorials that use it. But in terms of being job ready, like unless like you're going to make money through using Firebase, like there's no point for me like putting any effort into it. And I feel like I waste a lot of effort like using Firebase, where instead I could have just spent more effort using technologies that companies actually list on their applications, like SQL database, what have you. And so that's my opinion. But you could be the judge of that for yourself. But for me, I'm 43 now. I started to learn to code when I was 36. Time is super important. So I really try to not do technologies that don't have job prospects. This is where my opinion of MongoDB versus Postgres, I don't like MongoDB anymore. Not that it's bad. It's good. It's easy to get started. There's so much stuff you could do. I've just never had a job where we used MongoDB. But for learning purposes, it is amazing. But for me, I tried because I'm older. I try to be realistic and just stick to like the basics, and stuff that jobs are listing on their applications.
Just to piggyback on Paul's point, yeah, as far as Mongo, I probably at this point I also would suggest like go at least with the not at least, but go with Prisma. Prisma is way better option. In general, when it comes to Firebase and rest of the backend as a service, I believe it's called. There's a bunch of them popping up, and therefore I definitely agree with Paul. You need to be careful. Firebase is like I find it super easy to work with. You literally can have, it updates right away. Everything, if you once you post it on Firebase, it automatically like refreshes basically for you on front end and all that. But at the end of the day, as far as job, it's far more useful that you understand how to make those requests. Again, I'm going to come back to the same old point. Making requests is way more important. Understanding how you do that from the front end, how you update your front end once you make the request. What is your approach? What are the best solutions? It's far more, at least again, in my opinion, far more important than working with ready to go service, which most likely you won't use once you get to the job. Because when it comes to job, they have, even if like, they most likely they won't use the straight up just HTTP request, but they will use something like that kind of is similar to that. I guess that's my best solution. As far as tutorials, there's actually, in my opinion, there's quite
Too
a few
many.
of them.
Too many.
Yeah, on Firebase. Okay, we definitely need to do the rapid fire right now. Now I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the questions. I had these two all the way up, so I don't know what we have over here. Well, we have Engine Boy. Yeah, that's the. If you have any questions about building custom project, reach out to Engine Boy. By the way. I also want to do a shout out to Abu. He's my teaching assistant, and he's been like super helpful. Finally, I've been able to catch up with everything with
Nice.
all the workload because he actually takes care of the questions in Q&A, and especially the ones where he's now checking the code, so I don't have to do that anymore. So yeah, I'm super
That is
grateful.
awesome.
Yeah, he does an awesome job. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see anything interesting?
There's a couple.
Oh, Engine Boy is saying he's looking for a new project idea.
All right, here's Engine Boy. I got one for you because I don't want to build this one myself. So I just discovered that I have adult ADHD, which makes me very disorganized. So I wanted to have application that's to do where I could put all the different to dos, and it uses AI through OpenAI, whatever API, to basically through chat to remind me of the most important tasks that I need to do by figuring out what it is for me, and then also talking me through of how to accomplish those tasks. I didn't think through it completely, but that's something that I'm thinking about, a time to do management app that's powered by AI to help me better manage my tasks. Yeah, so that would be my idea for you, for your unique project idea.
Okay, let's keep the rapid fire approach. So we have over here, I recently heard people saying that using Next.js can be confusing and give misconceptions because it blurs the difference between front end and back end. Would you recommend avoiding it when still I'm new? I'm actually going to repeat Paul's point that no, you should just learn the last one, the app, the Next.js 13, the app, whatever approach. At least try to get familiar with the general concepts and just kind of go from there. Don't even like in that case, don't even go back to the what was the folder approach before. What do you think?
The pages, yeah, exactly. So they're using the app folder, and the way they handle routing is a little bit different, and the way they get data is different. It's, in my opinion, all better. So just learn things from Next 13 and forward. Don't go backwards.
I joined as an intern in software company with more knowledge. They give me to choose between Angular or Nest.js. This is a little bit confusing to me. I thought Nest.js was a Node one and Angular is a front end framework. I don't know, is it a right choice or not? Advice, again, for me, like if the question is about the backend framework, it's an okay choice. I what is the new one was, I think the latest kind of trend is Fastify or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
But I would still probably use Express or Strapi. When working on the big project, all code start messing. I complete this project, but the code uh, doesn't. Basically, I'll just doesn't look good. But do you advise for new developers with big project? That's going to be the case. Look, um, refactoring refactoring your own code is the thing. You literally, this is what happens. Like I even take this approach where quite often before refactoring, like right after, I just build the feature, it's there, and then it's easier the next day, the after, I don't know, 2 3 hours, next month, even better. You look at the code, you're like, hey, listen, I can make some improvements. And that's what I was saying, by the way, as far as ChatGPT. If I see that the code is kind of like I can make some improvements, I literally go like, hey, listen, like what are your suggestions? How to make more one-liners. Now, with that said, am I the biggest fan of one-liners? Well, it depends on, if I can clearly understand the functionality, yes. But if it's something that, I need to scratch really in my head of like what's happening, I actually prefer explicit, like being explicit over, just having some one random line of code. And then every time you go back, you're like, okay, what's happening over here?
Yeah, for me, I literally have an iterative process for writing code. My first step is write the ugliest code that works first and get the big picture overview of what I'm building. And then through iterative process, I keep improving. And sometimes like I'll get to a point where everything works, but I learned that I made so many mistakes that I'll just rewrite everything from scratch based on what I learned from that experience. So having this iterative process is perfectly fine, and you will always be refactoring your code. That's perfectly normal. The only issue with refactoring code, because you could always improve any code you write, is what's your timeline and when's the deadline to get it. So my approach: get it to work. Once everything works, I iterate to try to improve the parts that I can through refactor.
Okay, we have a last one, which is also super awesome because it has two parts. Quick two questions. What is a React query? What is it? What does it replace in vanilla JS? And then I'm gonna get to the second question. So essentially, it's not just vanilla JS, but the way I view it, the way I use it in my applications. Again, I'm not saying I'm 100% correct. I use it for caching. Essentially, it's like when you, especially when you build a, front end application which is using requests. Like one of the things you don't want to keep making those requests if you can somehow, some way avoid it. Imagine a scenario where you have an app with like, I don't know, 5 pages, right? And then every time you go to that page, if nothing is changing in that page, there's really no point to make the request. So that's where React Query comes in, and effectively you can nicely cache the results, and you can come up with a time. Let's say whether that's 1 minute, 2 minutes, or whatever. Then their second point is before the before the latest React router, you can actually could like it was super easy to set it up in a component since you don't need to use the use effect. So this is maybe not something to do with vanilla.js, but in general you just have this one hook you provide. Where do you want to get the data? What is the name of the query? Since you can invalidate it later, and you're pretty much good to go. Now with the latest React router version, it's in my opinion, it's a little bit more clunky because you cannot pass the hook anymore in a loader. So now you need to pass the whole query client into the thing and then make the request. Again, not the end of the world, but it's definitely, again, long story short, I kind of went off rails a little bit. It's for caching. You can cache the requests. What
Yeah.
about you, Paul?
I've never used React Query. Just never had the need for it. I think there's caching included in Remix behind the scenes, and I think Next.js 13 now. I mean, I don't know about 12, 11, because I really dove into Next with its newest features. It also has like caching that you get out of the box. So I've never had a reason to use React Query. And in terms of TypeScript, just someone who's already working, it's not like a fad. It's literally like you need to learn TypeScript. every code base that I work for, if it's not TypeScript yet, on the roadmap, they're looking to convert it to TypeScript. If you're working on a team, that's basically the way to go now. And certain things like Next, I know Angular, you can't even use vanilla JS anymore. It's just whenever you start an Angular project, it's going to be TypeScript. Next.js gives you option, but it starts the project in TypeScript. Even at Strapi, we're converting our project to TypeScript. So it's here to stay. So if you learn JavaScript, your next natural step is to learn TypeScript. And the one thing that I'll tell you about TypeScript is that you could learn it incrementally. Don't think like you have to master it before you get hired. I suck at TypeScript, but I still make every project in TypeScript now just to kind of practice and move forward. But I think it's here to stay 100%.
It's definitely here to stay, and I mean, again, this is gonna vary, but I still think that you should learn React first. A lot, like unless you literally master the TypeScript before, and then maybe you can do both of them at the same time. But in my opinion, you still like learn React, and then right after React, you can. That's one of the things that you can start implementing. That is actually learning TypeScript.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, it's definitely here to stay.
I follow like the John's path, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all through his courses, then learn React. And once you have basic understanding and all that stuff, you can get through his courses. The next thing you do is learn either Next.js or Remix and just start your project in TypeScript and just learn TypeScript along the way as you're building your Next.js project. And to me, that has been like a really nice way of kind of easing myself into it and learning things as I go along.
Yep. This should do it for this week. It was awesome to see Paul. Thank you very much for making time for us. We really, really appreciate it. It was an awesome chat as always. Thank you to everyone who wrote questions, participated in discussions and everything. And yeah, if nothing major happens, we'll see you next week. Awesome.
Yep.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Thanks, no, John. As always, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Awesome. Bye-bye. See you guys later.